Escape into heartfelt journeys of second chances and small-town magic. Subscribe now for stories that warm the heart. Hey, my name's Alex. I'm 24 and 3 weeks ago, I packed everything I cared about into the back of a dusty 2009 Ford Escape and left Columbus for good. The job that had been grinding me down for 14 months, the apartment with the leaking ceiling, the girl who said she needed space, and then moved on before I'd even finished carrying boxes to the curb. I left all of it behind without looking in the rearview mirror once. 6 hours west on I-70, past billboards for fireworks and corn mazes, past exits I used to know by heart as a kid, and then the last 20 minutes on narrow county roads lined with sagging barns and golden soybean fields. Home, or whatever was left of it. The house my parents left me sits at the end of Willow Creek Lane, a 2-story clapboard thing with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch that creaks like it's telling secrets. Dad died when I was 19. Mom followed 2 years later. Since then, the place has just been waiting, shutters closed, grass growing wild the way old houses do when nobody's left to love them. I pulled into the gravel driveway just after noon killed the engine and sat there listening to the ticks of cooling metal. The silence felt huge after the city. No sirens, no upstairs neighbors arguing through the walls, just cicadas and the faint smell of cut hay drifting in through the open window. I told myself I was only coming back to breathe to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. A pit stop, a reset, nothing permanent. I spent the first couple hours hauling boxes inside, wiping dust off the oak table in the kitchen, opening windows that hadn't been touched in years. By late afternoon, I was out front wrestling with the overgrown front lawn, sweat sticking my t-shirt to my back, the push mower coughing every time it hit a patch of clover. That's when I heard the screen door creak next door. I knew the house on the right was still occupied. I'd seen a silver Subaru in the driveway when I rolled in. I just hadn't expected her. Riley Evans stepped off her porch carrying a ceramic mug, steam curling up into the September light. She was 34 now, 10 years older than the last time I'd really looked at her, but I would have recognized her anywhere. Same chestnut hair, a little longer, pulled into a loose knot at the nape of her neck. Same quiet way of moving like the air made room for her. She wore an oversized gray sweater that slipped off one shoulder and a pair of faded jeans rolled at the ankles barefoot, even though the boards had to be hot. She stopped at the edge of her yard, maybe 15 feet away, and just looked at me. Not the quick neighborly glance you give someone new moving in. A real slow look, the kind that starts at your face and travels all the way down to whatever's left of your soul. I straightened up, wiped my forehead with the back of my wrist, and managed a dumb little wave. "Hey, Riley." Her lips curved, not quite a full smile. "Alex Turner," she said soft enough the cicadas almost swallowed it. "You grew up." I laughed more out of reflex than anything. Because what else do you say when the girl who used to babysit you is starring like she's trying to solve a puzzle that's been missing pieces for a decade? She took a sip from her mug, eyes never leaving mine. Then out of nowhere, she said, "You remember what you promised me when you were 10. I blinked. My brain scrambled through childhood memories. Tree forts scraped knees. The summer the whole town lost power for a week. Nothing clicked. She tilted her head, that half-smile growing. "You picked a dandelion, got down on one knee in my backyard, and told me when you grew up you were going to marry me." Heat crawled up my neck. I opened my mouth, closed it, then let out a short laugh that sounded more nervous than I wanted. I don't actually remember that part. Riley's eyes softened, something flickering behind them I couldn't name. Not amusement, not nostalgia exactly, something heavier. "That's okay," she said quietly. "I do." For a second, neither of us moved. The mower ticked as it cooled. Somewhere down the road, a dog barked once and stopped. I waited for her to laugh it off, to wave and head back inside like neighbors do. She didn't. She just stood there holding her coffee barefoot in the grass, looking at me like she was seeing two versions of me at once. The scrawny kid with the gap-toothed grin and the man standing in front of her now sunburned and a little lost. I cleared my throat. "Good to see you, Riley." "You too, Alex." She took a small step back toward her porch, then paused. "Welcome home." She turned and disappeared inside screen door, banging softly behind her. I stood there a long time after she was gone, staring at the spot where she'd been the echo of that last sentence hanging in the air like late summer heat. "Welcome home!" Funny thing was, for the first time in years, it actually felt like I was. The next few days fell into a rhythm I hadn't expected. Mornings were mine coffee on the porch, the smell of sawdust and old wood while I tore out the rotting boards on the back steps. Afternoons belonged to the hardware store runs the post office. The slow relearning of a town that had kept breathing while I was gone. And almost every day around 4:00 when the sun started sliding west and the heat loosened its grip, Riley would appear. Sometimes she'd just be watering the hydrangeas along the fence line. Sometimes she'd walk over with a plate covered in foil, peach cobbler, pecan pies, once a slice of chocolate cheesecake pie that tasted like the county fair. We never made plans. She'd set whatever she brought on the porch railing, linger long enough for a hey and a how's the house coming, and then drift back to her side of the yard like it was the most natural thing in the world. But it wasn't the desserts that kept pulling me outside. It was the way the quiet between us never felt empty. One afternoon, I was on a ladder patching the gutter when she showed up carrying 2 mason jars of iced tea. She handed one up without asking, condensation dripping over her fingers. "You're going to fall and break your neck," she said, squinting up at me. "Probably," I answered to taking a long drink, but the gutter's been sagging since Obama was president. Figured it was time. She laughed short, surprised like she hadn't meant to, and the sound settled somewhere low in my chest. That was the first time I really noticed how little she talked about herself. I'd mentioned the city, the job I'd walked away from the ex who still had half my books in her apartment, and Riley would listen, head tilted, eyes steady. But when I asked about her, she'd deflect with a shrug or a joke or another slice of pie. I let it go. People out here don't pry, they just wait. Then came the evening I learned waiting has limits. I'd driven into town to drop off some paperwork at the lumber yard and took the long way home, past the county nursing home, a low brick building with too many flags out front. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a handful of cars under the security lights. Riley's silver Subaru was one of them. She was still inside it. I slowed, not sure what I was seeing at first. She sat behind the wheel forehead, resting on the steering wheel's shoulders, moving in tiny, almost invisible shakes. The windows were up, the engine off. She looked like someone trying to hold the whole world together with nothing but willpower and failing. I eased my truck past, parked 2 rows over, and killed the lights. I didn't get out. I don't know why. Maybe because walking up felt like trespassing. Maybe because some kinds of pain need witnesses, not rescuers. I just sat there until she lifted her head, wiped her face with the sleeve of her cardigan, and stared straight ahead for a long minute. Then she started the car and left. I followed at a distance to make sure she got home. Okay. Then went back to the house and did something I hadn't done since I was 12. I wrote a note. "If you ever need someone to drive you home, I'm right next door. No questions. Alex." I folded it around a travel pack of tissues and tucked it under her windshield wiper before the sun came up. She never mentioned finding it, but the next afternoon when she brought over a loaf of banana bread, she set it on the railing, looked at me for a long second and said, "Thank you." 2 words barely above a whisper, but they carried more weight than anything she'd said so far. A couple nights later, we were sitting on her porch steps sharing a pot of coffee because the evening had turned cool enough for it to feel right. Fireflies blinked in the side yard. Somewhere down the road, a tractor rumbled past. I finally asked the question I'd been swallowing for days. "You okay, Riley?" She stared into her mug like the answer might be hiding at the bottom. "Nobody's asked me that in a long time," she said, not in a way that expected the truth. I waited. She took a slow breath. "Dad's got dementia. Some days he knows me. Some days he thinks I'm Mom and asks where his little girl went. I'm at the nursing home every day. I'm not at the library. 10 years of that, Alex, 10 years of being the only one left who remembers what he used to be." Her voice stayed steady, almost flat. The way people talk when they've told the story so many times it stopped feeling like theirs. "I had a fiancé once." She continued, still not looking at me. He was good, patient, said he understood. Then one day, he stopped understanding and started counting the years until Dad was gone. When he realized it might be another decade, he left. Quietly, politely, like returning a library book. He decided he didn't want any more. She laughed, but it came out brittle. After that, I stopped telling people I was tired, stopped telling them I was anything, easier that way. The crickets filled the silence between us. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't say I'm sorry or that sucks or any of the useless things people reach for. I just reached over and set my hand on the step beside hers close enough that she could take it if she wanted. She didn't, but she didn't move away either. After a minute, she turned her head and looked at me. Really looked, and I saw it all, the exhaustion, the loneliness she wore like a second skin, and underneath it something stubborn and soft that hadn't quite given up. I'm okay most days, she said quietly, but some days I forget what it feels like to have someone notice I'm not. I nodded throat tight. I notice, I said. She studied my face like she was trying to decide if I meant it. Then she gave the smallest nod, picked up her mug, and stood. Night, Alex. Night, Raleigh. She walked inside. The screen door creaked shut behind her, but the porch light stayed on long after she was gone. A soft, steady glow spilling across the yard and onto the steps where I sat for a long time, listening to the quiet and realizing it didn't feel so empty anymore. The rain came in sideways that night, hard, relentless. The kind of storm that makes the old house groan and the gutters sing. I was on the couch with a beer and a baseball game. I wasn't watching when the knock came. 3 soft taps almost lost under the drumming on the tin roof. I opened the door and Riley was standing there soaked through. Water streamed off the hem of her tan trench coat, her hair plastered dark against her cheeks. A rectangular glass dish cradled in her arms like a peace offering. Hi, she said, teeth chattering just enough to notice. I made lasagna. Too much lasagna, thought you might be hungry. I stepped aside without thinking. You walked over in this. She gave a sheepish half shrug as she crossed the threshold. It wasn't raining when I left the house. The kitchen light felt too bright after the dark porch. I took the dish from her, still hot through the towel she'd wrapped around it, and set it on the stove while she peeled off the dripping coat. Underneath, she wore a simple black sweater and jeans, both clinging in a way that made me look at the floor longer than necessary. You want a towel? I asked. I want to stop shaking, she said, attempting a laugh that didn't quite land. I disappeared down the hall, came back with one of Mom's old quilted towels, and handed it over. She dried her face and hair, then just stood there hugging herself, eyes flicking around the kitchen like she was seeing it for the first time. I really did make too much, she said again, quieter. I got 2 plates, forks, a couple of mismatched wine glasses I'd found in the cupboard. We served ourselves straight from the dish, because neither of us felt like looking for a spatula. The lasagna was perfect layers of sausage and ricotta and sauce that tasted like someone had spent all day thinking about comfort. We ate at the table under the single hanging bulb, rain hammering the windows, thunder rolling slow and low over the fields. For a long time, we didn't talk, just the scrape of forks and the occasional crack of lightning. Then she set her fork down, folded her hands in her lap, and looked at me straight on. You asked me the other night if I was serious, she said, about the marrying thing. I swallowed. I did. I wasn't trying to be cute. She traced a water ring on the table with her thumb. I was 10 years older than you even then. You were this fearless little kid who didn't care about anything except building the best tree fort on the block. And one day you looked at me, really looked, and said, when you grew up, you were going to marry me so I'd never be sad again. Her voice stayed steady, but her eyes were glassy. I laughed it off at the time. You were 10, but I kept that stupid plastic ring you gave me for years. Found it last week when I was cleaning out a drawer. I didn't know what to say. The rain filled the silence for us. I'm not telling you this because I expect anything, she went on. I'm telling you because I need you to understand why I look at you the way I do sometimes. You were the last person who ever promised me forever and meant it. She gave a small, sad smile. I know how ridiculous that sounds. It doesn't, I said and meant it. She looked down at her plate again. After Nathan left my fiancé, I stopped believing in promises. I got real good at being the strong one, the one who didn't need anybody. But some nights, I'm so tired of being the only one holding everything together. Her voice cracked on the last word. She pressed her lips together, embarrassed, and stared hard at the table. I reached across and covered her hand with mine. She didn't pull away. I'm not 10 anymore, I said quietly, and I'm not going anywhere right now. That's all I've got, but it's true. She turned her hand palm up under my fingers, curling just enough to hold on. I don't need you to marry me, Alex, she whispered. I just need to know. If things got heavy, if I let you in, would you leave too? The question hung between us, raw and enormous. I thought about the girl in Columbus who said I felt like a pit stop. I thought about the job I'd walked away from, the life I'd been running from. I thought about the way Riley's porch light stayed on every night like a signal she didn't know she was sending. No, I said, the word came out rough, certain. I wouldn't. Thunder rumbled closer this time. She looked at me for a long moment, eyes searching, and then something in her shoulders loosened. She let out a breath that sounded like it had been waiting years to escape. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. She scooted her chair around the table until she was beside me, rested her head against my shoulder, and let me wrap an arm around her while the storm raged outside. The lasagna went cold. The rain kept falling, and for the first time since I'd come home, the house didn't feel empty at all. The morning after the storm, Riley was gone before I woke up. I found a note on the counter written in her neat librarian handwriting on the back of an old grocery receipt. Lasagna reheats better with extra cheese. Thank you for last night. That was it. No phone number. No, we should talk. No smiley face. Just those 3 lines and the faint scent of rain still clinging to the kitchen. She stayed scarce for the next few days. I'd catch glimpses of her Subaru pulling out early porch light off by 9 curtains drawn tight. When our paths did cross, she'd give me a small wave and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, then disappear inside before I could say anything more than, "Hey, I got it." She'd cracked herself open, shown me the raw edges, and now the fear had rushed back in like flood water. I'd been there myself, so I gave her the space she was silently asking for, even though every instinct told me to walk next door and refuse to leave until she let me back in. Instead, I threw myself into the house. New shingles on the back roof, fresh paint on the porch rails. I took a job with a local construction crew. Good money, honest hours, the kind of work that leaves you too tired to overthink. I told myself I was doing it for me, to plant some roots, to prove I wasn't just hiding out here until the next escape hatch appeared. But every nail I drove, every wall I primed, I pictured Riley watching from her kitchen window. A week later, I was on her side of the fence replacing a broken picket when she finally spoke first. She stood on the porch in an old Ohio State hoodie, arms wrapped around herself like the morning was colder than it was. "You don't have to fix my fence, Alex." "I know," I said, not looking up from the hammer. "I'm fixing mine. This one just happens to be in the way." Silence stretched. A crow called from the maple tree between our houses. She came down the steps barefoot again and stopped a few feet behind me. "I'm sorry I disappeared," she said quietly. "I got scared." I set the hammer down and turned to face her. The sun caught the lighter streaks in her hair, the faint shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before the rain. "I'm not asking you to be brave every day," I told her. "I'm not even asking you to be brave today. I'm just asking you not to decide for both of us that I'm going to leave." Her mouth trembled just a little. "I've been left by everyone who ever said they'd stay," she said. "Dad doesn't even know who I am half the time. Nathan couldn't wait it out. Even my mom moved to Florida the minute the doctors said hospice. I'm really good at being the one who doesn't get left. Alex, I'm not good at trusting someone won't." I took one step closer, then another, until we were close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in her eyes. "I'm not them," I said. "I'm the guy who's been running for 5 years and finally found a place he doesn't want to run from. And part of that place is you." She searched my face like she was waiting for the catch. "I can't promise you forever," I went on. "I'm still figuring out how to promise myself tomorrow. But I can promise you every today I've got, one at a time, starting right now. The words felt huge coming out, but they settled between us, gentle and solid like stones in a riverbed. Riley's mouth trembled. Then she did something I'd never seen her do. She let go completely. She came around the table, climbed into my lap like it was the most natural thing in the world, and buried her face in my neck. I held her while she shook, not with sobs, just with the release of carrying everything alone for so long. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clear. "I don't need forever," she whispered. "I just need you to stay today and then tomorrow, and then the day after that." "Deal," I said. We sealed the way we seal everything quietly, a kiss that tasted like coffee and October air slow, and certain no audience is no rush. Winter came early that year. First snow fell the night before Thanksgiving, soft and thick, blanketing the yards and the roofs, and the space between our houses until you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. We spent Christmas Eve on my couch under an old quilt, eating leftover lasagna, warmed up with extra cheese, watching the colored lights from the little tree blink against the windows. Her head on my shoulder, my arm around her, the dog we'd adopted from the shelter, a mutt named Rusty who thought Riley hung the moon asleep across our feet. No ring, no proposal, no grand speeches, just the quiet, steady choice to stay. Some nights I still catch her looking at me across the kitchen table like she's waiting for me to vanish. I just reach over and lace my fingers through hers until the fear fades. And some mornings I wake up before dawn, listen to her breathing beside me, and feel the same small panic that I'll ruin this, that I don't deserve it. Then she shifts closer in her sleep hand, finding mine under the covers. And I remember this isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up. We never went back to being 10 and 20. We didn't need to because now finally we know exactly what we want. And we're still